Welcome to Molten Core. It's time for another tour. A place where the player reaction is more bipolar than an astrology girl. A place home to one of the most iconic bosses in WoW's history. He who was old when the world was young, because that is a flex apparently. And whilst Ragnaros is iconic, Molten Core itself sure as shit ain't, because it's 17 shades of brown and red and they all blend into the crevices of your memory. But do you know what is iconic? The memories, the adventures, the first time you set foot in this god-forsaken place designed in one singular week because Blackwing Lair was not ready yet. Having to delve into the depths of Black Rock Deeps, fighting bosses annoying and interesting, and having to complete your attunement quest to unlock the shortcut to Molten Core, so you didn't have to trek your way through BRD every single time. From the first time you saw your first Core Hounds, to the Flame Walkers, to the many variations of Elementals, and so many interesting things that felt awe-inspiring, mostly because of just how big Molten Core felt. It was massive, ginormous, insert a random your mother joke right here, and it was simply and honestly a phenomenal opening to World of Warcraft. And that held true for Classic in 2019. Returning to Molten Core had a level of awe, of joy, that very few games have managed to recapture. When your guild with its 40 members, of which only 30 were actual human beings and 10 of them were bots who were being carried, stepped inside to slay all the bosses and get fat fucking loot. The number one goal in World of Warcraft. Well, technically it should be third on that list, since making friends and going on an adventure should be first and second, but we all know the truth. We all know why you play WoW. And we all had an amazing time. Back during many people's first times in vanilla, playing on 3 FPS and 4,000 MS. The second time on private servers where people started to min-max Classic. And then once again, back in 2019 when Classic WoW was re-released, ushering in a whole new generation of players who got to experience Molten Core for the first time. Then Season of Mastery happened, but no one cares about that. So that brings us to the current day. Season of Discovery has released and it's amazing. Controversial, but amazing. It's changed Classic in a way that the hashtag No Changes crowd would have lost their goddamn mind if it had been released in 2019. But SOD, for all that it does wrong, does so much more right, and it's a step in the right direction. And thus we have Molten Core, and Molten Core will be a hell of an experience, especially if Sunken Temple and Phase 3's launch has shown us anything. We are all going to alpha test Classic Plus's first phase together, and it's going to be frustrating, but it's gonna be amazing. Now I need to make a singular clarification. Molten Core could technically be Phase 5, in which case change the title to Phase 5 and we're good. And with that said, Molten Core and its disgustingly large trash packs designed for 40 players, followed by its 10 bosses who have less mechanics than Menagerie from Noma combined. A lot of walking, because as I've said already, this place is goddamn massive. But before we dive into what makes it amazing, I want to actually cover the negative first and explain why it's negative. Because Molten Core is going to be a 20-man raid in Season of Discovery, which means the amount of trash in Molten Core will be excessive, even if the level of power creep we have all acquired thanks to runes. And I know we're going to be even stronger in Phase 4, but the amount of trash and how fast we can clear it is irrelevant to the fact that 20 people having to spend well over 2 or 3 hours clearing trash is unfun. Again, I'm talking about the average guild and player here. Ain't no one give a shit about your sweaty guild clearing the raid in 17 minutes, you are not the majority of the player base. And this is evident with Sunken Temple and how much trash it has in comparison to Noma and BFD. Molten Core and Sunken Temple, as of its standing right now, has way too much trash for the instance to be and feel fun. Sunken Temple's boss fights are amazing and fun. The difficulty itself is enjoyable, even if it is a bit too overtuned for many people, but it is a fun raid. The trash clearing though is not. I play WoW to slay epic bosses, not to slay 17 billion baby dragons, 17 billion baby elementals, or 17 billion trolls. So Molten Core will absolutely need a tweak to the amount of trash or the health pools or the pacing of the raid itself. Molten Core had 10 bosses in Classic, but as we've seen with every level up raid to date, they will clearly be able to add more bosses and mechanics, so we may end up with 11, 12, or even 13 bosses. And that would mean less trash and more fun fights. Not that adding bosses to every previous level up raid is a guarantee of more bosses, but hey, Why not? Realistically speaking, the developers will simply remove the amount of trash whilst buffing what they leave behind to make the trash feel impactful without feeling like a slog. Or they can just leave a billion buff mobs and we can reenact Afghanistan and democracy. Molten Core itself opens up with a view of all of the red and brown you're going to be farming for the next 8 to 16 weeks. Greeted with an array of trash packs, a bridge you have to cross, or trash skips if you're speeding through. You make your way though, heading to the first boss, Lucifron, a Flamewalker. He technically has 2 mechanics, but they might as well not exist with how irrelevant they are. His adds are 2 Flamewalker Guardians are more dangerous than he himself. So since we know that his 3 base abilities are essentially worthless, let's think about how the developers will buff them or change Lucifron. Remember, Season of Discovery is classic WoW with a spicy twist. The 2 adds Lucifron comes with will likely need a buff perhaps to 4 mobs with a modifier where you can't kill the 2 mobs before the boss because they respawn. Because in classic the strategy was just to stack everything and cleave. Lucifron himself will likely have his abilities actually hit harder as well, and probably hit more targets. Now being the first boss of Molten Core, he will likely have minimal actual changes if I'm being honest. The difficulty will start to ramp up with the later bosses, so let's take a stroll 100 feet deeper into Lucifron's room and take a look at Magmadar. Magmadar is a big ass dog who, whilst looking petable, has more aggression than a pitbull named Princess. He has 3 main abilities, and these are actual abilities: Panic, Frenzy, and Lava Bomb. Now Lava Bomb is quite literally a brain cell check, meaning that when you cast this, move. Frenzy on the other hand is a Huntard check, making sure your hunters cast Tranquilizing Shot, which luckily for all of us drops from Lucifron, who was just defeated minutes ago. If the hunters don't cast Trank Shot, your tank is toast, especially so in Sod, where I assume Frenzy will do more than just make Magmadar an even bigger boy, but very likely commit unspeakable things to your main tank. And then we have Panic in the Disco, where you can just cast Fear Ward or Tremor Totem to mitigate the fear effect. Well, for Alliance, just Fear Ward. #Blue has no totems. Now, these abilities are pretty simple, but they could be made more spicy quite easily. For example, Frenzy might be a guaranteed ass clapping, so the main tank will need preemptive shielding and precasting. Now, I don't know how much harder they're going to actually make this fight, because keep in mind, Classic has to be clearable by the majority, so the raid cannot be too difficult. So the boss fight will be harder, but mostly will just be more interesting and require a bit more effort and cohesion. So now that the big dog has been put down, we move on, making our way through 75 trash packs before we get to Gehennas, Lucifron's more competent brother. Gehennas and his adds have more mechanics and require people actively sitting up in their chairs, just a little bit, but sitting up nonetheless. Now technically, just like Lucifron, Gehennas' abilities are a joke, as are his 2 adds. But with a bit of Sod spice, they'll need to be mitigated properly, so let's see how they can change and expand upon them. Rain of Fire, Gehennas' Curse, and Shadow Bolt. For Rain of Fire, you simply move out the way. The tank will kite the boss or adds away depending on where Rain of Fire is cast. So in Sod, you can expect this ability to be amplified. A larger area, 2 or 3 Rains of Fire is cast at once. Coupled with the ad's ability to stun, this could make Rain of Fire actually deadly. Now they probably won't add too many mechanics to Gehennas because he's only the 3rd boss, but his other 2 abilities will likely be buffed as well. And then we have Gar, big stone man who does club with his 8 stone sons. Gar's whole mechanic is removing buffs from you and slowing you. He himself has no mechanics, much like the average classic dad who has 7 jobs, 18 wives, and 52 kids. Gar is too tired to actually play well, but his 8 sons on crack, they've got abilities. His sons, who are named Firesworn 1 through Firesworn 8, are actually menaces, but the entire fight can just be mitigated with 8 Warlocks. Now this isn't a 40-man raid anymore, so you can't just stack Warlocks. Not that people did stack 8 Warlocks in Classic, you just brought more warriors. But essentially, this fight's difficulty will come from the amplified ad management. Typically the second tank would tank all 8 kids, but you might need 3 tanks for this fight, to split the ads 4 and 4. The ads also need to be tanked within 15 feet of their dad, or they get separation anxiety and start melting down, doing way more damage. Realistically, the way they change this fight would depend on the direction of how they want to handle this in a 20-man raid, but either God gets a massive buff and loses custody of the kids, or he becomes weaker but ends up having way more kids. We'll have to wait and see where he ends up. Then we move on to the halfway point of Molten Core towards Baron Geddon. He who fucks off for 5 minutes and then randomly walks back in and wipes your raid because no one was paying attention. He only has 4 abilities, and they are very easy abilities and don't actually require much effort when done properly. Keyword there, and in Sod it'll be even worse. Now he has 2 main mechanics that people need to watch, Living Bomb and Armageddon, and both of these will be amplified much more drastically. Living Bomb is a raid check to see who is awake, or for your raid leader to yell, "Get the fuck out!" And Armageddon is where you literally all have to, "Get the fuck out!" before he blows up.
I'm about to blow.
Technically, you can kill him and skip Armageddon, but I don't think that mechanic will be available in SOD. I think you will actually have to run away. Which then brings us to the next boss, Shazra, who was for the most part a joke, but his abilities have the potential to be amplified to be a stopgap for most raids in Season of Discovery. His blink and threat wipe, his arcane explosion, his constant curses and anti-magic abilities make him, in my opinion, the first menace of Molten Core and SOD. I'm not sure exactly how the devs will alter his spell kit, but making him teleport twice as often and casting a ranged arcane explosion is just two ways they can amplify his difficulty. Again, no matter how hard they make the raid, it has to be clearable by the majority. So temper your expectations when it comes to the raid's difficulty overall. Molten Core and SOD will be much harder, but everyone will still be able to clear it. Nonetheless, after killing another lizard snake man, we move on to Golemag, a big as shit fire giant, and whose main ability is a lag and FPS check. If you have neither lag nor FPS issues, he is quite literally a joke beyond measure. In SOD though, his abilities will be amplified high enough that his earthquake hits harder and is genuinely more dangerous, also increasing his health limit for enrage to 30% for when he enrages as well, making this a solid DPS check. Now though, we are up to boss 8 and moving on to bosses with more and more mechanics. Sulfuron, the even bigger brother of Luciferon. Sulfuron has 4 kids that must be pulled to the side so you can serve Sulfuron divorce papers. Sulfuron's own abilities are essentially non-existent, and the main problem is killing the ads as they do healing, so dark mending must be interrupted. Their other abilities exist, they're just not relevant. Once you kill the 4 ads, you kill Sulfuron, or you just cleave all 4 together and ignore mechanics. In SOD though, they will likely have to be tanked apart, and the heal may be uninterruptible, but that might be too hard for classic players. And finally, we have Major Domo Executus, the 9th boss and most likely the biggest tank, healing and DPS check in SOD's history, because for some reason the second to last boss has been harder than the last boss for every SOD phase so far. Just think about it. Calrus, Menagerie, and then Aranicus. Nonetheless, Major Domo is a simple fight. You kill his 8 ads and then he surrenders and heads off to wake up Papa Ragnaros. But see, killing his 8 ads isn't very simple, at least it won't be in SOD, because it's super simple in Classic. You simply sheep the 4 healers, then clap the elites, and then kill the healers. Major Domo though does cast shield, which will likely be drastically stronger and more of a threat to your clear and SOD itself. The ads will likely get more health and perhaps another ability or 2 thrown on top of them. Overall though, Major Domo's danger comes from how much the ads get buffed and how much flavor they're given. So you did it. You killed 9 bosses, you've doused all the runes, and then that brings us up to the most iconic boss in all of Classic WoW. Ragnaros, the Fire Lord. And he is a big boy. His iconic roleplay does get boring after the first time, but it's something you've got to watch regardless. He has 2 abilities, well technically 3 if you are in a not so great guild in Classic. Wrath of Ragnaros, Lava Burst, and Submerge. Submerge only happens if the fire takes longer than 3 minutes, and in SOD it's 100% going to take longer than 3 minutes, probably closer to 9 or 10 minutes. So that means prepare your booty hole for multiple submerges. And this ability summons a lot of ads you have to defeat before he re-emerges, and these ads do a lot of damage. Now though, let's talk about Ragnaros' actual abilities, Wrath of Ragnaros, which is the tank swap ability, which can be skipped with enough fire resistance gear. In Season of Discovery though, I don't think you'll be able to avoid this ability, and you will need to do the tank swap consistently and properly. And then Lava Burst, which is his ranged ability, and a very easy to mitigate ability, but as this is the beta of Classic Plus, it won't be easy in SOD. And that's Molten Core. So now that we've covered all the bosses, the question comes down to this. How difficult will the developers make Molten Core after the Sunken Temple debacle? They've already said that they don't want to make the raid too hard, as they want the majority of the player base to clear it. They don't have to clear it week 1 or week 2, but the majority of the player base has to clear all the content. So I personally expect that the raid will become harder, but not hard enough that many people struggle to clear it, but not easy enough that it's another snooze fest. I expect a major difficulty spike which will be mitigated by runes and gear that will make everyone drastically stronger. So even though the raid is harder, we're also much stronger, so the raid becomes easier. And honestly, as much as Classic is about easy content, having the raid not be cleared day 1 or even week 1 might be fun for once, but that's a controversial opinion. If you like the video, subscribe. If you don't, subscribe so you can hit my next one. Thank y'all, Ebonhard out.